Peace, IG. Daniel KC1 NCF tapping in with you. And this live is daily survival tip number 18. Establish protocols and procedures. This is something that, it's a tip that you want to definitely apply early on in the game. This is something that is going to change throughout your really it's just going to keep changing throughout the time that you're alive. From the moment you start thinking about different types of procedures, protocols that you want to have in place as you discuss these with your family, as you discuss these with other people in your community, whoever it is that you deal with or intend to deal with, where your survival and preparedness is concerned. As you discuss protocol and procedures, as new information and intelligence is gathered throughout your time in the preparedness realm, you're adjusting, you're reassessing, you're making adjustments to your preps, you're making adjustments to your procedures and your protocols. So this is an ongoing thing. All right, this whole idea of establishing protocols and procedures, it's always going to be ongoing. You're going to change procedures, you're going to add new procedures, you're going to rehearse procedures, but the reality is that you need to have them in place. Now, what are some reasons or some things in which you're going to need to establish protocols and procedures? Number one is probably evacuation. You want to have some protocols and procedures in place to deal with the potential reality of evacuating. What are some reasons that you might evacuate your home, your homestead, your a bug out location that you may already be at? One may be some kind of adverse weather event, meaning a fire. Now this, and then that could be an adverse weather event, but fire could be home based as well. A fire broke out in your home for whatever reason. Something was cooking, a space heater not being used properly. Not having, lit a candle and having it properly placed, or just in a dangerous position. A fire catches in your home. You should have already established some kind of protocol or procedure with your family on what's the best way to get out of the home. Every home is different. Some people live in apartments, some people live in houses. Some people's houses are single floor, some people have multiple floor houses. Some people live in apartment buildings that have 10, 20 stories, especially if you live in a place like a project. Some people live in apartments where there's only 2 stories, right? Some people live in basements. Some people have one entry, one way in, one way out. Some people have multiple ways in, multiple ways out. So there is no one specific plan. You may be able to exit your home or your place of residence by way of the front door or the back door. One of those options might not be available. You might have to exit through window, in which case you would need something like a fire escape ladder if you're on 2 stories or above, right? So understanding now, okay, if a fire were to take place at my place of residence, like within the home, peace, we got Sister Beatrice in the building, Paul Walker joined us, we have Marissa Black in the building, Sister Lizzie J, Queen Trinace in the building. Thank you all for tapping in. Right, so if you're thinking about evacuating for fire, with some procedures and protocols you can put in place. First of all, you need to have your fire extinguishers, your fire blankets, and whatever type of fire suppressing material you have in strategic locations. They shouldn't be all in one location. You should have them at the extreme ends of the home. You should have them throughout the home. You should definitely have some kind of fire suppression or fire retardant or fire eliminating tools or whatever in your kitchen, right? But you want them upstairs if you have multiple floors. You want them downstairs. You definitely want them near bedrooms of children who may have less of the mind to spring into action. At least if you put a fire extinguisher there, a fire blanket, and you can train them. If for some reason you woke up in the middle of the night by the fire alarm, you can see this flame somewhere, you can see this smoke. Grab this fire blanket out of its holster and wrap it around yourself. And whatever you do next, just keep that fire blanket with you, or have a fire extinguisher outside their door and teach them how to use it. But that's one reason why you might want to set up a procedure, a protocol for evacuation. Now, if you're dealing with something else that is not necessarily confined to the home, but can affect the home, like a wildfire that is a mile away, a half mile away, but it's fast approaching your area, how do you evacuate that? Because depending on the direction that the wildfire is coming from, is it coming from the west of your home, the east of your home, south, north? You have to establish an evacuation route that will cover that. Because if you have one evacuation route, and that route is actually what is on fire in that direction, then what is your backup plan, right? So establish procedures and protocols for that kind of thing. If it's a flood, it's going to be different. If you live in a flood area, you might have a raft, you might have a life raft, an inflatable life raft in your home. Well, every member in your household should know how to inflate that life raft. What would happen if someone is not home at the person, if there's only one person in the home who knows how to inflate it or knows where it's located, but that person is not home at the time, it doesn't help. So everyone should know, where is this located? Everyone should know how to use all the equipment and all the tools that are necessary for that, and be able to inflate that life raft and get the people in it, where the life jacket's located, whose life jacket goes on first, who's gonna, hold the oar. If you have an oar for moving this thing, it's likely if it's an inflatable light raft, the thing don't have a motor on it, right? If you can afford to have a motorized boat or something at your home, in your garage or something like that, because you live in a flood-prone environment, then hey, more power to you. But then someone has to know how to gas that thing up, and you're gonna have to keep gas on hand to be able to use it. But you have to establish procedures and protocols for that as well. Same thing for hurricane. Or earthquake, which are things where you may get some kind of warning ahead of time, where you can spring into action and put into play that procedure or that protocol. Now, when you're talking about evacuation, you also need to, again, with your evacuation routes, you need to have already established, go bags or flea bags, or a pack that is designed to get you from your point of origin, wherever you are when the disaster strikes, to the safe zone point. So from point A to point B. Point A to point B could be a specific. It could be from one specific location to another specific location, meaning I'm here when a disaster strikes. Point B is outside of the disaster zone. Or if it's a timed thing, from the beginning of the disaster until the end of the disaster, meaning you have to hold yourself out, hunkered down, or you have to travel a certain amount of distance or through time to get yourself out of it, right? So, yes, we have a question. Does gas go bad after a while? Yes. So you have to understand, depending on what type of engine you're using. If you're talking about gas for a generator, if you're talking about gas for a boat, if you're talking about gas for your bug out vehicle or something like that, then you have to understand the ethanol levels of the gas you're using, and whether or not it has to be treated if you're going to store extra gas. And then you're gonna have to rotate that out, meaning if you have a bug out vehicle, or just your car in general, and you keep extra gas on hand for situations like what happened with the pipeline and they ran out of gas, right? Say you use that gas, so you say, okay, this might happen again, it's possible, it's probable, or whatever have you. I'm going to keep 5 gallons of extra gas. I'm going to keep 10 gallons of extra gas. So you need to know if this gas has a 3-month shelf life, a 6-month shelf life. There's ways that you can treat gas. I know for some of my 2-stroke engine, landscaping tools, there's ways that you can amend the gas where it will last up to a year. But that means I know it takes me 3 weeks to go through X amount of gallons of gas. Then at least 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the end of the year, I'm going to start to use that gas up and replace it with fresh gas that is amended to last another year. So yes, gas does go bad after a while. You want to know what type of gas you can use and how to treat it to extend its shelf life. But having it on hand is definitely key. But you have to know that in advance. Again, that's a procedure and a protocol dealing with getting it, having it on hand, treating it, and making sure that you're rotating it, right? So that's a good question. Thank you for that. And so having the go bag, knowing what direction you're going to go. If disaster, as some I say often, right? I didn't coin this, but disaster strikes without warning, and time waits for no one, right? So you have to always be prepared now, not yesterday, because it's gone already, and we don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow. So now is the only time to prepare, right? That being said, you have to have established already different exit routes or whatever way you can go and meet up with your family. But this is the thing, your children might be in school, you might be at the workplace, your spouse might be at the gym. When something happens, is there already a predetermined meetup place or rendezvous spot? Is there already a predetermined bug out location that you're all supposed to meet at, and what is the procedure and protocol? How are you establishing communication before you even arrive there to make sure that everyone's en route, just in case someone has to, go from their job, not to the bug out location, but to pick up another member of the family who's in transit from another location or the other. So there should be a protocol procedure for that. Whose job is it to do that? Whose job is it to get back to the house and pick XYZ up? Whose job is it to go get grandma from her home or whatever, and make sure she gets to the bug out location? Establish this ahead of time and even practice these procedures and protocols. What are something else that you might set up protocol and procedures for? We talked about evacuation. There's so much more that can go into evacuation, but there's also sheltering in place, which again can happen for many reasons. One reason you may shelter in place is also adverse weather events. Maybe it's a tornado and you're going to hunker down in the basement or in a cellar or something like that. You should already have provisions in your cellar already. X amount of food, X amount of water, blankets, flashlights, or whatever have you, and even digging material, shovel, and work gloves, just in case a tornado did actually go over your home and then trapped you in that cellar or something. You might need work gloves to move debris. You might need a shovel or pick or an axe to be able to break up debris to get yourself out of that. But getting in the cellar might have been the best choice to avoid actually being sucked up in the air and thrown around like debris in a tornado, right? But if you're not thinking about that in advance and you go into that cellar and then the house comes crumbling down on top, how do you get out? Have a pickaxe, have a shovel, have work gloves, something that you can deal with sharp debris or whatever have you. Have oxygen masks down there, or respirators down there, something to help you breathe. But again, the water, the food, just in case you might be there for a few days, either digging through the rubble or waiting for somebody to come to your aid. You have something to sustain yourself down there. But what is the protocol? What is the procedure? Are we boarding up the windows? Is there somebody who's designated to go and turn off the power, cut off the power in the circuit breaker, and shut down the gas lines just in case that's affected, right? And you don't want to end up your home exploding because you didn't shut off the gas lines, right? That needs to be a procedure and protocol for most natural disasters. Someone needs to know that if you own your home or whatever, someone needs to cut power so that you avoid electrical fires, and then someone needs to also cut off the natural gas flow and all that kind of thing to avoid explosion or something to that effect. That needs to be worked into your protocols and procedures. And then having somebody making sure that whatever you have stored in your cellar or basement stays rotated if it's a perishable item or something that expires over time. These are protocols and procedures, right? So that's one thing for sheltering in place is a natural disaster. Like a tornado or a hurricane, that you might wait it out. Also, it could be long-term or short-term depending on, for instance, the pandemic. People were sheltering in place semi-long-term, right? Meaning it's not for years, but we were asked to shelter in place. And for some people, lasted a week. Some people didn't shelter in place at all. Other people sheltered in place and didn't go nowhere for months. But those people who did that were literally already preppers. But for instance, I basically didn't have to go anywhere. If I didn't want to, I didn't have to go anywhere for a while when the pandemic fell off. But if something like that happens again, and they've already been warning us that this isn't the last time, and it will happen again, we don't know when, but wouldn't it be nice to already have certain provisions in your home so that if they say shelter in place, you're not competing with people in the grocery store for what little slim pickings are there, and then you're also putting yourself in the middle of a super spreader event, meaning everyone's touching and vying for the same thing, screaming, and you're screaming and you're projecting a whole bunch of droplets or whatever in the air, and you're fighting for that stuff. So avoid having to go to the grocery store or to the gas station by already having provisions in your home, knowing that this has happened before and could potentially happen again, and you don't know when, so just start to do this now. But then that might be a long-term thing. A short-term thing might be, again, someone is murdered and there's some kind of civil unrest, and you're like, I just don't want to be out there because they're rioting in my city, because maybe your city is the city this time where someone got shot for whatever reason, and people are protesting and stuff. That might be short-term, but again, if it was 3 or 4 days of rioting, do you have enough food in your refrigerator? Because some people shop every day for food. Some people don't keep a week's worth of food in their refrigerator, or a week's worth of water, or have a water filtration system or something like that, so that they don't have to go buy bottled water. What are the procedures and protocols? You might even have to consider different things depending on if you live by yourself, if it's you and your spouse, or if it's you, your spouse, and children, or maybe you have roommates who are grown adults. They don't see things the same way. How do you prepare to be locked down with them? Are you all on the same page? You have conversations about this kind of thing? And if you do, what is the protocol and procedure when it's a full-grown adult who doesn't have to follow your direction, is not necessarily on the same page? What is the protocol and procedure when it comes to boarding up windows and locking doors? Having some kind of, perimeter surveillance or perimeter checks, or someone, they do a perimeter check around the house, or someone is monitoring a camera system, and something to that effect, right? What are the protocol and procedures there? What if someone tries to breach your home? What are the protocol and procedures? Do the children know to get upstairs to the room on the left, lock that door? There's already a flashlight in there. There's already a radio in there, just in case they had to flee the house because there's ruckus going on downstairs and you're engaging. Is there a fire escape ladder for them to be able to get out the back window while you're trying to contain the threat downstairs or in another room in the house? Do your children know that? Do they know what they're supposed to do in that situation? But that's a protocol and procedure you have to establish in your home. Listen, babies, if something ever happens and I say, protocol 2, they know to get upstairs. Don't come out of that room until you hear me knock on the door with some kind of secret knock, or you hear my voice specifically give you this exact command. Do not come out of this room, not for your father, not for your auntie, not for your uncle. It needs to be my voice and my voice alone type situation. Or maybe it's my voice, your father's voice, your auntie's voice. They need to know ahead of time what do they do in a situation like that if you call protocol 2, or whatever you choose to name that protocol. But you have to, again, establish protocols and procedures so that when things go to the left, things that are probable or potential, things that we've seen happen in the past, recently, in the recent past, or in not too distant past, right? And maybe it happened in a different part of the country, but anything that happened next to it at your neighbor's house could potentially come to you. Anything that happened 10 years ago can likely happen again. Nothing typically happens one time. We wish that Columbine was a one-off thing. How many school shootings have happened since Columbine? And how many different states and cities has it happened? And on so many different scales. It was only, 4 or 5 weeks ago that a 9-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, a 13-year-old girl shooting up at the police. They had AK, shotgun, handgun, in a gunfight. If y'all know what I'm talking about, look it up. It's like a 9-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl got into a gunfight, and they were basing their plan off of GTA, Grand Theft Auto, a video game. A 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, a boy and a girl, got into a gunfight with the police intentionally, and they weren't. The girl went out. She got shot. Talking about, we're gonna do this like they do in GTA. And the little boy, once he seen the girl got shot, he came out with his hands up. But they showed the little boy in the interview, and he just sitting there looking at them in the interview room. He ain't saying nothing, keeping his mouth shut, holding water like he a grown man. Like, nah, I got, it is what it is. He wasn't crying. He's sitting there. The detective, he's just sitting there, straight face. Little boy, I think he was like 9 years old, 9, 10, or 11. Like, we live in a crazy world. Anything can happen at any time. But we're not here to talk about that. But lockdown, or shelter in place, right? If it's some kind of civil unrest, if it's a long-term thing like another pandemic, what are the procedures? What are the protocols? What are the procedures and the protocols for first aid, for trauma response, for defensive maneuver, or defensive postures that have to be taken in a civil unrest, in a home invasion situation, or if there's just some kind of injury sustained. Because it doesn't always have to be some kind of global thing going on, some kind of regional thing going on, something from the outside. Inside your home, different type of emergencies happen. Someone cuts their hand, but really, really, really bad. Someone, breaks a bone, dislocates a thing. Who's going to respond to that? Do people in your house know CPR? Is it only one person that knows it? Everyone in your house maybe should take training on CPR and know what to do, how to spring into action. Where's the first aid kit? How to use the first aid kit? How to use the respirator? How to use the CPR mask? How to give chest compressions? When to do it? What is the protocol procedure? Calling, was in the home, then you don't necessarily have to ask for permission. If it's for a pedestrian out there, then you have to ask, and get permission from them to even administer aid. Unless they're unconscious, then you can administer aid and you'll be protected by Good Samaritan laws. But you need to know those protocol and procedures. But in your own home, something happens to your baby or something happens to you, do you really want someone's only option to be call 911 when they could be given chest compressions and making sure that the oxygen-rich blood that's in your body keeps flowing to the brain so that you don't go brain dead? Because X amount of time without oxygen to the brain is going to cause injury that may or may not be reversible. So those chest compressions go a long way, especially if they're done properly. But again, you have to establish protocols and procedures, and people have to know what to do, when to do it, and how to spring into action. So these are very important tips that you have to consider. There's so much more we can go into, family. But again, this is daily survival tips. I can't sit here and go through everything. This is what I have a class for. So if you're interested in learning more tips like these, if you're interested in learning more about survival and preparedness, and radio communication as it deals with survival and preparedness, then visit www.radioprepare.com and sign up for our 3-day training course, full training course there, and tap in with me and learn some more. But this was daily survival tip number 18: establish protocols and procedures. And again, this is something you do. It's not just for emergency. Establish this for your business. Establish this for just rearing your children. There's certain things that you can do. You might not call it a protocol or procedure. You might not keep it so formal in wording, but you should have some kind of way of doing things with your business, how you deal with your children, how you deal with rewarding them versus punishing them, their protocols and their procedures, right? Even for my son, like getting up in the morning, no, first thing you do when you get up in the morning is use the bathroom, brush your teeth, get in the shower. Ain't no go sit on the couch, there's no go to do your lesson, no, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, get in the shower. That's a procedure, that's a protocol. That's first thing in the morning, point blank period, right? That's established, right? Established protocols and procedures. But again, we're here to talk about survival and preparedness, so that's what we're here for. Thank you, family, for tapping in. Please go back if you did not and watch this full video. Leave a comment and let me know whether or not you found value in this video, and then go back and watch some of the other content that you may not have already, and let me know in the comment section whether you found any value in those videos. Ask questions, and I'd love to answer those questions. Like, comment, share, and tell a friend. Appreciate your time and attention. Daniel Casey, 1NCF, tapping out. Peace. Yes. Oh, I'm Mercer Black says being organized, establishing procedures and protocols, and prioritizing things. I talked about priority in an older live, but yes, ma'am. Q-, thanks for tapping in. Peace.